On today's episode of Hidden Histories, we will explore the woman behind Shakespeare. There are several writers that believe that Shakespeare was a fraud and that his legacy was a hoax and a charade in order to conceal the real author. Some writers include Sigmund Freud, Charles Dickens, Henry and William James, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Mark Twain, Orson Welles, and Walt Whitman. In 2007, a declaration of reasonable doubt, British actors Derek Jacobi and Mark Rylance questioned how Shakespeare was able to acquire this knowledge of foreign languages, which he clearly demonstrates in his supposed plays. Where did Shakespeare develop, almost seemingly overnight, this dramatic mastery of Elizabethan worlds of law, court, mathematics, heraldry, medicine, horticulture, falconry, astronomy, military? There's just no way that he could have been exposed to all of this. And also, why did he leave a last will and testament that made no mention of anything that he wrote? Why is there no existing evidence of his actual authorship of these poems? There is not one play, one poem, or one letter in Shakespeare's own hand that has ever been found. So, if Shakespeare didn't write the plays, who did? In 1922, the Shakespeare Authorship Trust was founded to seek, and if possible, establish the truth concerning the authorship of Shakespeare's plays and poems. And in April of 2007, the trust added a new name to the list, Emilia Bassano, Lanier. You may ask, why is it that Shakespeare, this so-called brilliant writer's amazing plays are being scrutinized, and why his authorship of them is being questioned? Well, one could ask Walter Keane the same thing. Just like Margaret King, Emilia Bassano was a woman forced in the shadows, while credit for her work was given to a man who made a name for himself. So where's the proof? Well, the proof is in the sonnets. Let's take a deeper look. Shakespeare's works supposedly contains more than 2,000 musical references, many displaying a firm grasp of musical intricacies. For Shakespeare, this makes no sense, and there's no obvious answer. But for Emilia, it does. She had 15 of her closest relatives, including her father, her husband, her uncles, her brother-in-law. They were all professional court musicians. They were also members of the Queen's Recorder Troupe, which they performed regularly at the plays and balls for the Queen. Emilia's maternal cousin, he was a lutenist. His name was Robert Johnson. He was the most popular musical composer for the plays attributed to Shakespeare, which also typically included half a dozen songs. King Henry VIII brought her converso father, Battista Bassano, and his brothers from Venice in England in 1538, and King Henry VIII installed them as his court musicians. Her mother, Margaret Johnson, was a Protestant and a daughter to one of another court musician. Her family lived in London's Aldgate district, which was just a short walk from the theaters. There are some 50 references in his plays to hawking, which is a rich man's preserve not generally available to commoners like Shakespeare. But for Emilia Bassano, she lived for 10 years as the mistress of the Queen's master falconer, Lord Henry Hunsdon. Is it a coincidence that earlier versions of the play called Taming of the Shrew was written in 1593, just a year after Emilia Bassano married Alfonso Lanier, whose name means falcon in French? Is it also a coincidence that both play versions feature characters' names, Amelia and Alfonso, which Alfonso was her husband's name, and Baptista, which is her late father's name? Why did Shakespeare start writing Italian marriage comedies in 1592? This was around the time that he was thought to have arrived in London, but it's also a perfect fit for Emilia Bassano's biography. At that time, Emilia Bassano was forced to leave the royal court and was married off to her cousin Alfonso Lanier, which was another court musician. Also, Emilia Bassano was considered a feminist of her time. She composed a 3,000-line book of original poetry that debuted in 1611. This would make her the first woman to have published a work of original verses in English language. Shakespeare raised his daughters to be illiterate. One of Iago's speeches in Othello is a virtual description of the entire distinctive fresco painted on a house in the family hometown of Bassano. Whoever wrote the text must have visited that town. Arguably, yes, Shakespeare and some other authorial candidates may have visited Italy, but there is no known reason why any of them would have stopped in the town of Bassano. Unlike Venice or Verona or Padua or any other popular bustling Italian city, Bassano was hardly a major tourist center. The playwright had to have known Italian well enough to make elaborate puns and jokes. There's a reasonable likelihood that Bassano spoke Italian fluently. Surviving letters from her family to Queen Elizabeth were written in Italian, and police records of younger members of the family also indicate that they spoke it in the streets. Do you still need more proof that Emilia Bassano was the woman behind some of Shakespeare's greatest plays? Well, if Shakespeare knew Bassano, either as his paramour or through Lord Hunsdon, it's possible that he may have simply exploited her knowledge of music, falconry, Italian, and Jewish sources, the royal court, and other areas of expertise. It's also believed that Bassano secretly included her claim to authorship by encoding her name in several plays. For example, when Othello was published in 1623, it contained 163 lines that did not appear in the first edition. All four names, Emilia, Willow, Johnson, and Bassanio, they all correspond with Emilia Bassano's baptismal name, Amelia, her mother's name, which is Johnson, her adopted name, which is Willoughby, and her family name, Bassano. Do you agree with our findings? If not, do your own research, find your own evidence, and leave it in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell to be notified when new videos are available.